Tab TV presents Taking Up Space, a discussion about interracial relationships in Canada. A conversation led by Rhonda Smid, owner and creator of Tab Fitness. Featuring Ipsita Paul, film and television actor, Broadway performer, and children's author of I Am Awesome Because. Rachel Luttrell, a multi-talented film and television actor, known for her role as Taylor in Stargate Atlantis. She's also known for Black Panther, NCIS, and ER, and has now added writer and producer to her credits. Karen Cox is a theater maker, director, and educator. She has directed productions at Brock University and Humber College, assistant director at Factory Theater and Why Not Theater. She sits on the Teachers Advisory Panel for Canadian Opera Company and is a board member for Theater Direct. Jordana Daumec was born in New York City, trained at Studio Maestro, and then Canada's National Ballet School. She joined the National Ballet of Canada as an RBC apprentice in 2003 and was promoted to first soloist in 2015. Charmaine Stevens was assistant dance captain in The Lion King and went on to pursue her career in the beauty industry as an esthetician. She currently trains at Vitality Pole Dance and Fitness, where she competes and choreographs for many events in this city. How do we create change? How do we move forward? Taking Up Space starts now. Hi, welcome to Tab TV. My name is Rhonda Smid, and today we are going to talk about love. More specifically, we are going to talk about Loving Day. On June 12, 1967, Richard and Mildred Loving were the center of the Supreme Court case in Virginia that banned all laws against interracial marriage. They had no idea the impact that they would have on those Jim Crow segregational laws that were created to create such a divide between white and Black people. All they wanted to do was love each other and raise their family in the home that they loved. And so today we are going to talk about interracial marriages, the impacts of their decision, and how we live our lives today as interracial couples. I am so excited to have this conversation. So let's get this started. Hello, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me. I have with me today Charmaine Stevens. I have Jordana Daumec. I have Ipsita Paul, Karen Cox, and Rachel Luttrell. Thank you so much again, guys, for coming to join me. And thanks to our new person today, Jordana, for joining us as well. So glad that you all could join me here today to talk about Loving Day. But before we talk about love and Loving Day, I wanted to just ask you all how you were doing. Since the last time we talked about some serious stuff the last time when it came to theater, but we also really just discussed ourselves as Black women navigating what's been happening across the States, but also in our own communities. Since I last saw you, I went on a march with my family, and it was inspiring. I totally could felt Rachel's voice in my head saying how you felt it was cathartic as I walked down that street in Bloor West Village, people, where I am like one little chocolate chip in a bowl of oatmeal. It's like, I'm saying, but to see people walking, all different races, Asian, Black, white, Hispanic, it was this beautiful thing. And walking down the street, holding my husband's hand with my Black power fist in the air, and my daughter with her mask and her sunglasses, with a friend holding on to a sign. It was the most unbelievable moment. And I can honestly say, when I was walking, I felt my ancestors behind me every step of the way, and I was teary-eyed. Rachel, were you teary-eyed when you had that moment when you were walking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes.
Amazing. Just, like the beautiful power that surrounded the experience. I was constantly, and then when everybody was chanting, and I would be like, sometimes I could barely get it out. I was so emotional. Emotional. But it was beautiful.
Yes. And Charmaine, How about you? Because I know you also went on a march as
Yes, it's the
well.
same experience. It's like hearing the calls and then getting choked up and just seeing the sea of different people being so passionate, as passionate as you about the cause was just like I couldn't even speak half the time. Like I was trying to be like, yeah, Black lives matter. Like just couldn't get it out sometimes. And I'm seeing my husband and he's chanting and we're walking side by side.
Yes.
It was such a, it just gives me shivers even now, just even think it was so beautiful. It was my first march as well. And I actually got more out of it than what I expected. I was expecting to show up to be there in numbers and hear the speeches, but I got so much more and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Has anybody else gone to any other um, events where, or not, I don't want to call them events. My daughter initially said parade. I was like, this is not a parade. Even though, even though there was a guy with a drum and, somebody else with a whistle and a horn, um, we stopped traffic. We were walking on Bloor Street, which is like, we weren't on a side street. I kind of thought we would be on the little side streets, but we were on Bloor and Runnymede right up to Windermere and stopped traffic. Now, not everyone was happy about this because there was one incident actually where a girl said, "You stupid N-word,"
What?
out the window. That happened because the one guy was blocking her car from turning into the street. Yeah, that was the only moment where I was like, and then there was another gentleman that had a sign up and was talking about all the Black people on the news and what they were doing. But I said it's because I didn't say this, but another woman was sort of arguing with him. But I think even today, people don't understand the lens. Like Lisa, you were talking about the lens that we look through when we are talking about Black people, and how this lens is a lens like that we're not even aware on a conscious level what we're looking at and how we're looking at it. Do you know what I mean?
And the history behind that lens.
Yeah.
A big part of the conversation in education right now is the hidden curriculum. So not the intended curriculum, like what is written down, the official document, but essentially the lens through which educators share the curriculum. And it's so invisible and so subconscious that if you don't peel it back and really take a moment to reflect on, why am I only sharing the British perspective or Eurocentric perspective? And this is for everybody, regardless of color, because we've all grown up in this white supremacist society. So we all have to pull back that layer and really start to analyze, why do we have certain views and perspectives and ways of seeing the world? It's because a lot of how we were educated, especially if you weren't educated in a house that wasn't white, like if you were educated in a house that is white, that lens is like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of brings me to what I wanted to talk today about, which is love. And one of the wonderful things about every single person on this panel, and I'm not saying wonderful as in, ooh, this is the only way to be, is that I actually found other women of like mind as far as having a interracial relationship. We are all very proud women of color, and we are all very outspoken when it comes to the rights of people of color. But we're also all married to white men. So let's have this conversation. Jordana is like killing herself laughing. But it's true. And because you are at the National Ballet of Canada, and you are probably surrounded or in probably the most Eurocentric environment, and some may think that that is one of the reasons why your husband might be white, but I just want to know what your thoughts are as far as how do you feel that we all ended up being where we are today.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of you will agree to this, that it was more my husband's like mind and soul that I was attracted to versus what his background was. And it was more that we were on the same page of understanding like how we felt about race, politics, religion, how we want to raise a family. Like those were the things that were important. Like I didn't see him as a color, really. You know what I mean? Like not, yes, he's white. It was more just the fact that our views lined up and like we matched together. And that was what was more important. And I've dated people of all different colors and backgrounds before. So for me, it wasn't like, oh, I'm only looking for one type of man.
And yeah, I do. And I was going to say, Ipsita, the one of the things that I loved finding out about you was your background. And I'm wondering if this influences your choice as far as a life partner, because your background is so diverse. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background first? Maybe that would help to inform, since I know you.
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, I feel like I'm mixed with everything. Yeah. I mean, my mother is, I've met my birth mother. I'm adopted. I've met my birth mother. I met her when I was 25. That is a story all unto itself.
Which we could have sometime, just you and me.
She's Spanish and Irish. And she didn't really know who my father was until she met me. So then she had an idea, you know, I guess you would say she had an idea of who my father was. And all the information I really have is that he is Black. I'm adopted into an East Indian family. And so I was raised in East Indian culture, but I was raised in like a white neighborhood, like an all white neighborhood in Ottawa. So, and I mean, I was one of probably like 10 Black kids in my high school of like 1,100.
Wow.
So I feel like, you know, pickings were slim in high school, but not slim as in like, you know, I feel like my husband we are completely aligned, like spiritually. He makes me a better person and want to be a better person. But did it, you know, my background definitely influenced who I was going to be with. If we're going to talk about, I mean, I feel like there's so many things that kind of go into that.
Yeah. So if we're talking about, like, you actually brought up a good point. You said pickings were slim. I think being a girl, I didn't grow up in Toronto either. Like I grew up in Brantford, Ontario. Lisa, I think you grew up in Ottawa as well.
Did.
Yes. Charmaine, I think you were the only sort of city gal. No, Rachel, you were also.
I was city gal, yeah.
Yeah. And Jordana, you grew up in
The Bronx.
In the Bronx, so
Bronx and Pennsylvania. So I had like both. I had like my experience of being surrounded by culture and then being like the Black family.
Yeah. So it's true though. Like I think I grew up in Brantford, Ontario, and most of the people that were Black were either related to me or felt like my brothers. So that was just not an option. But I did date Black men. Like I was fully convinced as I grew up that I would end up marrying a Black man. But which makes sense considering, you know, my dad, and I respected my dad, and I looked for men that sort of, I now know I looked for men that were like my dad. But I don't think that is why I ended up marrying Charles. I think Charles is still very much like my dad in personality, maybe not in looks, but in personality. But I wanted to ask, with the current climate, because we are sort of still talking about Loving Day, how do you look at your relationship knowing about what had to happen in order for you to have that relationship? So, did any of you know about Loving Day before Loving Day was a thing? Well, I know, yeah, I'm crickets except Rachel. But Rachel, explain why you probably know about Loving Day.
Well, I know about the laws that prevented people from different backgrounds from marrying each other, and I know how long they were entrenched, and I know when it was lifted because of my family, you know, because of my mom and dad. My mom being from East Africa and my dad being white from Louisiana, and so I know because of their stories about that. You know, the first time that my mom traveled with my dad from East Africa to go visit his family in Louisiana, and she was just, you know, those stories are very, very rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she had no notion of what racism was. It was just like, what do you know, until she got there. And yeah, so I know of it because of that, because of my family. So I was very much aware of it, but I feel like I'm a product of it. Even though they got married before, like 2 years before the ban got lifted officially.
So where were your parents married?
In East Africa and Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, yeah.
So they were married there because they couldn't be married obviously in Louisiana.
I mean, yes, probably, but also they had just made a decision to live there. That's where they wanted to be, you know, and that's where they wanted us to be until it wasn't. But yeah, my dad just fell in love with Tanzania, and that's just where they were.
And that's just where they were. I think that's incredible. I have, and what year were your parents married?
They were married in 1967.
In the year actually the ban was lifted.
Yeah, just at the very beginning of it.
Wow. I have aunts and uncles that were married in Canada, probably before the ban. And I've often wondered if their experience was different, because even though they were able to get married, it still didn't change the harsh reactions that people had to their relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah.
I guess the next thing I wanted to talk about was this sort of the racial segregation, and the point to the racial segregation was to, of course, continue to keep white supremacist ideals, to stop the products, as you and Jordana and Ipsita are talking about, being the product of that relationship because of racial purity, right? Wanting to maintain that racial purity. And so when I ask you now, if you think about those Jim Crow laws, have we moved well, it's obvious we've moved further ahead, but as far as the reactions to these types of relationships, have we moved farther ahead? And I'm going to shoot this to Charmaine.
I feel we have. Like, I feel it has moved further in terms of acceptance, maybe at a certain level. But I still feel there still is that reaction. And I do feel it has to do sometimes also to how dark you are, in relation to your white husband. But I feel people are probably not as forward with the negative feelings as it would have been back then. But I really do feel that it still simmers. It simmers. Like, you get questions, oh, how is it? Like, how is your marriage? I remember getting that like earlier on. I'm like, oh, how is our marriage? Well, it's fine. But then as they're kind of asking, you realize, no, they're wondering, how is it being married? You know, you're Black and he's white. Like, that's what they really want to say without saying it. So I feel it's become more subtle, but not as, I guess, things being hurled at you, I think I would imagine, or being feared of being, you know, your neighbors calling the police on you if you're married in Jim Crow times. So I feel we have, but I think there's a lot, I don't know, we still have a lot further to go with it all. And it's also representation. Like we just need to see more in the media, on TV, then it will be a non-issue, I believe. And
Ipsita, what about you? What would you say, like, for your relationship, being somebody not on the opposite end of the spectrum of Charmaine or myself or Lisa, but again, Charmaine did bring up the difference in skin tone. So how would you feel that you are experiencing the same type of reaction that maybe myself or Lisa or Charmaine would experience?
I mean, I find that even when my husband and I first started dating, and this is like, like someplace like Ottawa, I mean, from like especially older people, we always got the looks, and even just like
Yes.
or like on the bus or anything, or just walking by holding hands, you would get like the disapproving like looks, you would get even just the like, that kind of thing. And I remember just being like, and I felt like I noticed it a lot more. I mean, even in the very beginning, I remember saying to my husband, like when I first went, this is probably, I believe this was our first date. I remember going over to his house, and he had to like run into the house to grab something, and I walked in the door, and his mother didn't do like a double take. She did like a triple take. Like it was a look, and then like another look. And my husband said, "Oh, it's because you're wearing ripped jeans." And I was like, "No,
not the ripped jeans."
I was like, "Oh, bless you. You think it's because I'm wearing ripped jeans?"
Oh, goodness. Yes. Blessing. Lisa, did you have any experiences like the ripped jeans? We'll call that the ripped jeans experience.
Ripped jeans gate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anyone involved in an interracial relationship, especially in our age group, will have experienced those kinds of reactions just walking down the street, doing the things we do, going to the grocery store, or when you're pregnant and you're with a partner. People know that it's a biracial baby or a mixed race heritage baby in your belly. And so it does ignite that kind of reaction out of people. I guess what I find confusing is that it still happens.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come on, y'all, it's 2020.
Yeah.
Understand. Yeah, I understand 20 years ago, perhaps, even that, I'm kind of like, it was the year 2000. But now it's like, it's 2020. Like, we really should be further along in the dialogue and the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And Rachel, what about you? Because you've had the pleasure of having relationships here in Canada and then relationships in I make you sound like you just had relationships all over the world.
Hang on a second.
Loving everybody.
I know I've known you forever, but
maybe I should have said that first, because I just made it sound like Rachel has relationships everywhere. No, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
What is the difference in reaction?
Difference in reaction. So I met my husband in Vancouver, and that's where we married, and that's where we had our first little one. And I don't really remember getting any kind of negative reaction to the two of us being together. I don't really remember noting anything like that. But it is interesting that the first time that I went to Vancouver, my parents, came to visit, and my mom noted that she was like, we've gone through a whole day and I haven't seen anybody who is brown. We actually made it a game, my mom and I, throughout her visit. We were like, one, a few hours later, two. At the end of it. So I guess we were a little unusual, but I don't recall anybody making us feel uncomfortable. But I wonder, I wonder if I was just so, I don't know, like, maybe used to it just because of the dynamic that I grew up in with my parents, that I don't know, like maybe I just brushed it away, or but I don't remember any like specific moments. And when we moved to the States, I mean, you know, they were, what's that?
That was a long sigh.
I'm trying to think. I mean, it was a long sigh because honestly, I'm trying to remember. I mean, you know, every once in a while, of course, you'll get the look. What was really interesting to me, however, was when we had our babies, and the reaction that people would have to me coming. That was the thing. Okay, so my son is quite blonde, and so, you know, when I was at the park with him, I was always with my little guy, the nannies would talk to me, you know, like they would immediately come talk to me, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I finally clued in, it's because everybody just assumed that I was the nanny.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like nobody clicked, and it was always a moment of confusion when he would say, Mom, and I'd be like, yes, honey. They'd be like,
Oh, yeah.
that was the thing. And it's cuckoo because we look a lot alike. It's just our coloring is different. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he really favors me, but you know, he's blonde. So that was always tricky to me. That's always been the tricky thing, you know. And those questions and those looks, like, oh, okay, you know, that was the thing. But when the two of us were dating, my husband and I were dating, we never necessarily, you know, felt uncomfortable. But yeah, once the little ones are here, it was constantly an explanation. Where I just enjoyed watching the looks on people's eyes. It was like,
Well, that kind of,
like they were going through a vortex.
yeah. But I think that sort of supports a little bit of, and I'm trying to remember if it was Charmaine or Lisa that had said that the colorism, the tone, the coloring difference between two people, and how this affects the reaction of how people go, that's okay, or that's not okay.
Yeah.
My personal experience, I remember it was just after I was engaged with my husband, walking around Yonge and St. Clair in Toronto. And this older couple was walking behind us, and I heard them say, well, she doesn't have a ring. Well, you know what Mama did? Because I was holding on to my right hand had on my husband's left hand, and then I made sure that this ring was flapping for whatever reason, whether I had, you know, to brush my hair at that moment, just to make sure that they said, yes, my love, he did put a ring on it. You know what I'm saying? So that was one thing that I remember. He's like, I don't remember that. But of course he doesn't remember that. And then the other time, there's so many, but going into the High Park, the, what's it called? The grocery store, the no frills at the Runnymede and Bloor. And having this older woman following us, like in the aisles, I could see her, and I was very pregnant. And when my husband went to the other aisle to get something, she came over to me. And so when somebody makes me a little nervous, I'll smile, I'll say good morning. I do that anyways, but I often think that helps to disarm people if they're feeling a little bit nervous around me. And she looked at me in the eye and she said, your baby's gonna have sickle cell. And then oh yes, people. And then she walked away and left me very pregnant, very emotional, in shock. Like I was like, well, what? And that's what she said to me. And actually, once my daughter arrived, I did have very many experiences of people thinking that I was the nanny. I had the nannies come over to me and say, oh, what happened to Kelly? Kelly's not watching Ocean anymore. And I was like, Kelly is my neighbor and Ocean is my daughter. You know, I was like, let's just sort this out right now. Kelly was working for me, was what I basically said in the end. But it was like, yes. So I would say personally, I think that when there is a color difference that is a little bit more extreme, that people are very quick to pass judgment. And I feel that if we can, ladies, just talk a little bit about colorism and how that affects us as a race in general. I'm going to ask Jordana this question. Do you ever feel that in your relationship with your husband, or even just in your life in general, that there have been moments where you have witnessed some kind of sort of racist act happening, with whether it is at school or amongst your friends, that you were witness to, but then were not a part of or excluded?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really confused by me. They like look at me, they're like, I can tell you're not like just fully white.
Yeah.
But I think because of how light I came out in the wash, that sometimes people think that they can say things around me because they're like, oh, but she looks like she's white. So I've had those experiences growing up in school where I've heard kids, you know, call another kid the N-word, and I've had to step in and be like, that's not okay, and like stand up for them, and then they get really confused. I remember being like, but you're not Black, and then me having to go through, but I'm a mixed kid, this is my background, that's not okay, you don't say things like that. And that's just the household that I grew up in. And like going back to what we were saying, like my cousins have gone through the same thing that you guys have gone through, where she's darker skin, husband's white, kids at the park, like the exact same thing in New York, like the Bronx or Manhattan, where you're bringing your kid to the park and they thought that she was the nanny, and that's New York, which to me just like blows my mind. Like,
I think we're also like in the instances around the nanny, there's two things interacting there. There's race and there's also gender at play. And societally, we are more accustomed to seeing a Black man with a white woman.
right.
So there's
introducing you to my mom because she just stepped in. Come in. Say hello. Hello, everybody.
This is beautiful mama. Hi, beautiful mama.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Rhonda, everybody.
Hi, so beautiful.
So
Thank
pretty.
you. I just harvested cucumbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Love you, Mama.
Hi.
Bye.
So sweet.
So Lisa, you were saying we have to love mama. This mama is like, you know, I'm not even gonna out what her age is, but let's just say there's nothing going on any part of it.
No.
and I mean, really, mama is the ultimate trailblazer. Ultimate.
Ultimate.
Yes.
Black woman from Eastern Africa, married man from Louisiana. That's like the colorism issue. That is like gender interacting with race. That is like,
I know.
Big ups to Mom.
We may need to bring mama back in the room.
I know. Mama needs to talk. Mama's got some stories.
Because
Yes.
we may need to bring mama back in the room.
Yeah.
But Lisa, you were saying as far as the colorism and gender, Cheryl Giudice, I think I talked to you guys a little bit. She wrote a book about interracial relationships between Black women and white men because of what you were saying, the fact that people are more likely to be accepting. And I think when we were talking before, and I was hoping you would bring this up again, about how we view men and women and how we view what men and women should look like through the lens that we are given right now. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
sure. And it's very clear to me that society has very clear definitions on what men should look like and what women should look like. It's of course based on a white supremacist lens, but there is a lens within our Canadian context and which is tied to the American and British context. And Black men fit the ideal of what a man should look like, you know, the big broad shoulders, the muscles, and we're talking totally stereotypically at this point.
Yeah.
And Black women are not a match at all. When you look at classical text, classical Eurocentric text, we talk about the fair skin, the delicate bone structure, and those are not features.
The long flowing hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally the long flowing hair.
That's what, that's great, right? But as we were, let's just get real. There is no time in this world where my hair could ever possibly be this long, ever. And it's just because our hair grows different. It grows this way. I actually had my braids out the other day, and my fro was like Jordana, it was like, but it's just thinking about that. There was something that came out in I think it's called OK. Oh, I can't quite remember the name of the actual dating site, but they were talking about who was the least attractive when it came to who was not getting the swipes. I'm just not into this swipe left or right, so I don't really know what this whole thing is. But they were saying that Black women were the ones that were the least likely to get the swipes yes on the dating apps. They were the least attractive as far as when they were rating who was the most beautiful of women, and Asian men were on the bottom as well. So, which is funny because a Blasian combination, you don't see that as often. And I don't know why not if we're both on the bottom. That there should be more.
Also, aren't we also the least likely to get married?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
Yes,
Yeah.
Black women.
Yeah.
And that, according to Cheryl Giudice, in her book, that was more a numbers game.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with Black female loyalty. Does anyone want to comment on that? Charmaine, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think because we know the history of what Black men have been through, and I think some Black women feel it's disloyal to move outside the race to find love. So they just literally will stick just within their, into just with Black men, just because they feel, well, I'm going to make my culture look bad if I'm not being super loyal and marrying a Black man. And I'm an esthetician, so I see a lot of different females, women of all ages. And there is a huge demographic of older Black women that just literally are kind of stuck. They're just stuck in not opening their hearts to different races or cultures. But it is that loyalty thing, and it has to do with the historical sort of put down of Black men, that they're not loyal, that they're all the stereotypes. So they feel that they're playing into the stereotypes if they're not marrying a Black man. Mm-hmm. So it's a very complicated mind game that some women go through, and they will be, I know ones that are single into their 60s, and they're really kind of really inspired by my story, and actually more shocked and amazed that it actually is working for 24 years. And I'm always, and I'm shocked that they're shocked, right? Because I'm thinking, I don't understand it. Love is love, and if you open your heart, but there is that sort of mental guilt and loyalty to the Black culture, and then what their family's going to think, what their friends are going to judge them, that are you as pro-Black as you are if you are with a white man. And I tell her I am very pro-Black. I am very radical about it. And my man is beside me. I actually had this discussion just recently, and she was just like, really? He really is okay with you and all the things that you post? I'm like, yeah, he knows who he married. But it is a stump. It is like a roadblock, is the loyalty.
Does anybody else have that the loyalty or the feeling of Ipsita, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to add on to what Charmaine was saying. I think there's also it's also a numbers game, I think, with Black women and Black men. We also just outnumber Black men. So I think it's if any Black men are looking outside of or having relationships outside, they're also incarcerated. It's we are there's just not enough, you know? So it's like, you know, Black women are also much more educated than Black men. So there are so many differences between Black men and Black women. So I think it's, you know, it isn't always aligned. So Black women do need to kind of think outside the box sometimes.
Well, yeah. Do you think that the education piece, because I heard you say that we're so much more educated,
Yeah.
is that something that is actually like truth, or is this what, again, us looking at a lens and going, this is what we've been told? I know the incarceration part is correct. University educated. Yeah. And so yeah, I just wanted to be clear about that, because I don't want people to say like, look, I'm a Black man and I'm educated. It's like, we're not talking about all Black men are not being educated.
No, just university educated.
Yes. So the statistics say that these are some of the points that might, but also statistics say that this is another reason why people are in interracial relationships to begin with, is that when you are a university educated person, your scope of who you're around, what you see, how you feel and think about things changes because your environment is different. Mm-hmm. So does anybody else want to speak to the loyalty piece as far as, you know, did anybody else feel like that they were, you know, being disloyal to... Yeah, I was going to say, if I'm honest, I would say the same. Like my husband, I didn't have a row of boyfriends that were Black, that were white. I think the first guy that I dated that was white was in high school. It was almost my last year of high school, because there was nobody asking this girl out. And it was all more about me, because I felt that I wasn't pretty, that I didn't have what Lisa talked about earlier, as far as, you know, being the fair and the delicate. I was muscular and I was, you know, dark skinned. I had lots of, I wouldn't say issues, but I did feel internally that no one would be attracted to somebody as dark as myself. And I think that was because of what I was being fed. But the first time I did date somebody that was white, I remember his parents saying, Rhonda is okay to be friends with, but she is not okay to have a relationship with. And that really stuck with me. That's like my first kind of boyfriend. That really stuck with me. So I think, did anyone else have that kind of like a first time experience dating where it sort of changed how you would date? Because that's just made me go like, okay, I'm going to only date Black guys, because I think that's the only person that's going to be available to me.
Well, I think for me, that's from Ottawa at the time. Ottawa is far more diverse now than it was when I was growing up. And so only dating Black people was not an option.
Yeah.
Like, that just wasn't an option. But I do distinctly remember in high school having a crush on somebody of Asian descent who told me how his parents rated the Asian community in countries of origin in terms of who he was allowed to date and be in relationship with. Black didn't even make it on the list.
Yeah.
Let alone in the top 3.
Yeah.
So it was very clear to me that not necessarily from his heart, but from his family's perspective, that I wouldn't be welcome. And so I just didn't date.
That was me. That was me. I didn't date because I felt the same way. I was like, I didn't want to get into that. And then when I did date, I chose the right guy for the time, but it was definitely not going to be the guy that would be the end guy, the guy that I would end up marrying. Because, does anybody else have any of those stories as well? Of just like not...
I mean, I dated, like, I want to say I dated a couple of different guys. Like any of the Black guys I dated, it was always they weren't serious relationships. And unfortunately, I felt like I wasn't treated well at all. Like it was just, and I knew that in my heart, I wasn't treated well at all. And I did have some experiences like the one that you were talking about, Rhonda, and you as well, Lisa, where it was just like you knew that those relationships that you were in where the families were very much like, this is someone you can be friends with, but this is not a girl that you bring home. This is not someone that you have a relationship with.
Yeah.
And so I felt so confused because in my parents' culture, it was also very much like there was a whole colorism thing was there. It was very much like I felt like I was just all over the place. Like I didn't know what was what. So yeah, like dating was just kind of like, I mean, I felt like when I met my husband, I was just like, it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't about color because it was literally one of those things like our eyes locked and I was like, this is the person I'm going to marry. We didn't do it till obviously like years and years and years later, but I knew I was going to marry him.
Rachel, did you have any of those experiences, or Jordana, did you have any of those experiences?
Rachel, you go first.
I mean, I didn't really date a lot in high school, like at all. I didn't really start dating until I was like 18 years old. And, you know, maybe it was because of that, you know, maybe it was because I didn't, you know, I was still trying to figure out who the heck I was and whether or not I was pretty or acceptable. I wasn't like, you know, like the super popular type of girl. And I don't know, I guess, I mean, maybe I was trying to figure that out. I didn't start my dating, I was going to say career. It wasn't a career.
I made it sound like it was a career earlier.
You sure did, and I'm like, anyway, it wasn't until much later. And I mean, you know, I did, when I did start dating, I do remember I dated somebody in my last year of high school, and I remember getting like anonymous phone calls, you know, back then, it's before we had cell phones, and people would say like really awful things like, you know, they would say things like, oh, well, you know, once you go black, you know, and then hang up. And I'd be like, what is that? Because I mean, honestly, I couldn't have been more prudish. I was like, huh. But you know, I would get that. I would get like really like weird, off base, you know, phone calls and like immediately hang up. So yeah, I did experience that.
And I'm thinking for you, because we're the same age, that if you're getting phone calls, this is literally like, it's not like,
I know, right?
It's
like all the way through. I'm gonna make this
exactly. It's not like a quick
true. That's definitely premeditated.
Standing on the wall.
Effort.
That and then hanging up and then having to do that again. Dial. It's like you gotta roll it out all over again.
So true.
That's a lot of effort.
A lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Exactly. So,
Jordana, what about you? How was your experience growing up with dating?
Yeah. So I think because I grew up, like, my mom's Polish, my stepdad, who's been with me like my whole life, is Puerto Rican. So I grew up already seeing that kind of mixed couple. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, that kind of, when I was looking to date, that's kind of what I was looking for as well, because that's just what I was comfortable with and what I saw, that like two different cultures can be together and it works out so beautifully. So I think for me, that's just what I constantly was being drawn towards. It was just a different culture to like mix together to make another like type of love kind of thing.
And I think that maybe that's why, Rachel, for you, and maybe I'm wrong thinking this, but that the effect of having somebody do the double take, you know, we're going to call it the ripped jeans experience. To have that ripped jeans experience happen, that you probably watched your parents going through that. And so
yeah, totally.
That became a normal reaction to a relationship instead of like a reaction to a black and white relationship. that was kind of suddenly what you perceived as a normal reaction to a relationship, like because that's all you've ever seen. I'm
Yeah,
wondering if my
probably.
daughter will think that as well, that people always, because it just happened the other day, we were walking down the street together as a family, and we got like the double takes from the car.
Yeah.
But then we also have, sometimes people will be sitting down as a family and somebody will make a comment like, "You're a beautiful family," like, and that happens too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think everyone out there is like crazy
Oh no, not by any means,
no,
no.
I think that the
Because
opposite can be said.
people view through different lenses, right? And it's just, are they looking through it? Are they looking at you through a lens of love, or are they looking at you through a lens of fear? Which is,
Yes.
and that's just the thing. Is like when people are looking at you through like a lens of fear, it's like it's scary. Like that I can't remember who it was who sent that propaganda.
Lisa, yeah.
That is like, that's terrifying, that's still being put out into the world, because it's, that's it, when people are looking at you like that and sharing that with people, that's scary.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, that picture of that couple, I'm like, oh, what a cute couple.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about, because I think we are kind of all in the same age range, or in and around the same age range, where we can talk about that feeling of growing up as Black women, and having no role models of beauty. So that beauty standard was definitely, I'm thinking Blair from the Facts of Life.
Yes.
I'm talking. Can you guys think of other role models that we didn't quite have?
Christy Brinkley.
I think the first Black model that I've ever saw that had actually short African natural hair was Rashamba. Rashamba was a model when I was in university, and I shared this story with you guys before, how I was sitting at the Mills Library, I'll never forget it, with a bunch of friends, and there was this, both models were beautiful, but one looked a little more like Beyonce, and Rashamba, who was my complexion, and they basically just said that they would never date anyone that looked like Rashamba. And I was sitting at the table and my heart was like sinking. And yet still I was like, I'm gonna date all Black men, because, even if it means I'm alone, because I believed, again, that loyalty piece, even though everything in society was saying that you're not attractive, no one is ever going to find you attractive enough to date. Was it like worth it in my head? I guess at the time, it was only until I started talking to a really good friend of mine named Sterling, and I think Charmaine knows Sterling, and we were out for my birthday with a bunch of people from Lion King, and because I was single at that point, and he said, Rhonda, I don't understand why you're single. And he's already married, and he himself is in an interracial relationship, beautiful wife, lovely child. And he was like saying, what's stopping you from seeing who is seeing you? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And I think Rachel and I over the years have had the same conversation. And of course I'm like, I don't know, it's my birthday, I'm single. And he was like, I'm being a man right now. I'm not just being your friend. I can tell you're a very attractive woman. And I can see 4 men right now checking you out that you're not even looking at. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he just pointed them out. None of them were Black. None of them. But that's not the point. He was like, Rhonda, you are not looking at who's looking at you. And he was right. He was right. Does anybody else have a story about that? Like, you're just so caught, like you're thinking, like, I was that woman that was so in my own zone of like what I thought everybody else thought I should be with, or who I should be with, that I wasn't looking at who was actually looking at me. And when I changed that, my life changed immediately. Does anybody else have a comment on that?
Well, I think it's just a matter of just of just seeing yourself even, because I think sometimes you're just you're trying to be these different things, and I remember being like, I can remember as far back as grade 2, and there was this kid, I remember his name, Rodney. I remember his name.
Of course, it's
he had
not.
like the hair. He had like the hair that came down over his eye, and he would always like, he'd always do this thing. Anyways, and he had a lisp. Anyways, he was so cute in grade 2. Anyways, and he was in like the opposite class from me, and I'm looking at him. He's looking at another girl, and I'm trying to be this other girl. She wore her hair in 2 pigtails one day. What do I do the next day? I wear my hair in 2 pigtails.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm literally copying this girl, trying to get Rodney's attention. Meanwhile, there's this boy, Brian, in class that likes me. I'm not even like looking at Brian, and Brian was so nice.
No.
And it's just to say, like, you're trying to like do something. It's all turning into this huge cluster, you know, and you're like, it's just, you have to just like see yourself sometimes and just get rid of the rest, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
yeah, colorism does plague us though big time and I think it affects Black women for sure on how they view the beauty, and I know it did for me. I'm wondering if it did for any of you, if you ever felt like you were not pretty enough, you know. Charmaine is like going, hello.
Oh, like my childhood, I thought I was ugly. I grew up feeling ugly, and it was always more of the, I mean, obviously it was all the racism I had as a younger kid, being Black, like called Black Chickapoo, because I went to an all French immersion school. It was all white. And so that was it too. But then there was another level that obviously when I was in my teenage years and in high school, that was like the omission of calling anybody my complexion beautiful. It was always the paper bag and lighter, like that sort of paper bag theory and lighter. So I would pick up on that. Even the boyfriends I was with were saying that. Oh, how beautiful she is. And I'm looking at me, I'm like, okay, I don't fit that, but you're with me, you know? And there was also a lot of mistreatment I put up with too, because I felt, well, I have a boyfriend, you know, and, you know, he's Black, and okay, I have a boyfriend at least, so I'll just put up with it, you know? And so I think I just kind of put up with a lot of that, but it really, really affected me. Like, I remember using, I can't remember what the cream was, but there was a cream that was sold at Shoppers that had hydroquinone, and using the cream just to kind of even out complexion, that memory came back. Like, I remember, I was using that cream. And I think it was interesting that the first Black beauty I remember seeing was Beverly Johnson on, I think it was either Jet or Ebony magazines that my mom had prescriptions for. And I was just like, oh, they're pretty. And I remember just like being just fixated on just like, and she was darker, you know, dark, like more chocolatey skin than like on the lighter scale. And then it wasn't until maybe the 90s when Naomi hit the runway, and I was like, oh my God, Naomi. I was obsessed with fashion television every Sunday. Obsessed. And that's when I'm like, okay, see that, but it was only one, you know. I always felt like that was always the token one. So I feel it took a lot of years to decolonize my brain on beauty. And it really took actually marrying or meeting my husband, because he actually was always like, your skin is so beautiful. Like, what, like, it's just so, I just love it. He just kept always praising and even the shape, even my body shape, because I was in dance and a lot of, you know, I did a lot of ballet, and I had a booty, I had thighs, I was very muscular. And I remember when we met, I was at Ryerson, and he was just, I kept saying I was fat. I thought I was fat. I thought my ass was too big. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's round. It's not big, it's round. And I literally was like, no, babes, it's big. Like, he's like, okay, let's get a measuring and let's measure with your shoulders, and you're fully, like, he literally had to like brainwash it, because I had a Black body and I was seeing through the lens of a white lens as well. So it's funny that, you know, my white husband coming into my life actually has made me the strongest Black woman I can be. Just, it's interesting. I'm almost like amazed by it, how that's what it took.
Well, yeah, and I think that this is something I don't think that a lot of people even know happens within the race, and that sort of this racial hierarchy that has basically, initially I thought it was Morton, but it dates further back to like somebody called the Navigator from Portugal, who basically basically gave all of these different, how can I put this? He created these levels in the hierarchy by suggesting, you know, Black was this, white means this, yellow means this. Like, he gave all of these headings, and he did lump Black and Indigenous people together. Black people were brought to this country, not Canada, but the United States and Canada. Who am I kidding?
Yeah.
To work because they were strong. Like, they were strong. They could survive more than sort of like the Indian population. They had more endurance. So therefore, they were put to work for that reason. All the other stuff about our skin being ugly and features being ugly and all that, that was sort of imposed on us by society to help, again, create this sort of white supremacist ideology. And I think that now, as being a 50-year-old woman, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and for the first time seeing beauty. Like, that's really sad, right? It's really, really sad. And the fact is a matter that somebody else looking outside, looking in, they're like going, I can't even believe these women are sitting here talking about the fact that they didn't feel attractive. When you look at the screen and you see this kind of beauty, you're going, I can't believe that these women don't think that they were attractive. I had somebody give me that cream, a cousin gave me that cream as a moisturizer, and I used it thinking that they were giving me moisturizer when I didn't know it was skin lightening cream. And has anybody else ever had those conversations with people in their family where they were told to stay out of the sun? Or, you know, would you like to talk about that, Ipsita, a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, like with my background, my family's is East Indian, and so I mean, it's like the colorism is huge, but it's also just like all the beauty aesthetics are very much like, it's all very British and European, and so I mean, I feel like I still struggle with that. I look in the mirror and I look at my nose and I'm just like, oh my God, my nose sucks, you know? Or I look at, you know, and it still like makes me want to cry because it's so ingrained in me that I can't even, and my husband's always like, I love your nose, you know?
Yeah.
And when my daughter was born, my mom was like, oh, thank God, you know, she got your husband's nose. And I'm just like, that's the first thing you have to say. You know, like those things are, I was always told to stay out of the sun because, I mean, right. And all I've been doing this summer, like now I'm like,
Bacon.
that. I'm just like, I'm getting all the color I can this summer. You know what I mean? Because I feel like right now I'm rebelling. I feel like a teenager. I'm like rebelling in every way I can. Like, I just like shave my head. I'm just like, you know, because I feel like, and sorry, I'm like going on all these different little tangents. I mean, my hair is like, you know, it's curly, like, you know, like Rachel's and Jordana's. And my mom used to just drag like a comb through my hair, like not even a brush, just like a comb through my hair because she's trying to just make it straight. And my mother's not a horrible person. She's just, you know, there's just all these ideals of beauty that, I mean, I don't have straight hair. No. If I go in the sun, I obviously attract the sun, you know, very easily. So it's like, and you would spend all summer outside and I feel like I would be punished because I was getting darker.
Yeah.
And I was constantly, you know, people talk about, or relatives, I feel, you know, just talk about you like you're not there. And it's just like, you know, oh, too bad about her nose, kind of thing.
And honestly, when I'm looking at your nose, I'm like, girl, you have not seen a black nose. I'm like, I'm looking at your itty bitty nose, and I'm going, you need to see a black. But I hear you.
You know, like it's when things are like told to you from such a young age, and it's like,
yes,
I feel like all I ever want to do, like when I tell my kid, I feel like I'm very careful with what I say to my kids, especially with what you say to your kids from a very young age.
mm-hmm.
Things that you repeat to them all the time. It's like, I don't want to repeat things that will hurt them, or that they're going to hear constantly in their head when they are, hello, like 42. I don't want them to be like looking in the mirror and going like, oh my gosh, you know?
Oh, no.
What are you eating? What is that?
The nose thing, I'm not I had a flashback that it used to be this whole nose pulling thing. I don't know if you had that. Yes. My sister would be like, pull your nose as a kid.
Oil.
Pull your nose. Yes, and it wasn't I told her, yeah, and do this. And she did that as a baby, and that's just
baby.
Yes, pull the nose. And then she would remind me when I was like old enough to pull my nose. And once I was older, that I made that connection. It was to try to straighten my nose.
It's to give you like a skinny
nose.
In my family, the nose is a big thing. Like the Roberts side of the family, they have wider noses. The Johnsons have longer noses. But in my family, it was like this whole thing where everybody was always like, ooh, you got a bridge. You got a little bit more of a bridge, because usually it's just very fleshy. But I really think that, like, as we talk about this stuff, I know everybody's like this now, looking at the Zoom, trying to find the love in their own noses. But it's
I feel like Michael Jackson. Like, what am I doing?
But this is the thing. Look at what happened to Michael Jackson or other celebrities that were in the limelight. The first thing that they would do, Black celebrities, would be to nose job.
Yep.
Right.
And even, I mean, like, listen, I feel like if you look at before and after pictures of, like, even over the years at some of those celebrities, their skin has gotten lighter, their nose, their chins, their cheekbones, what they do to their cheekbones. I'm like, your cheekbones do not need to get higher. Like, they are, you're starting to look really scary, you know?
Yeah.
They do change the first thing they do is change their noses. You're right.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any stories of, like, growing up and having I call it the beauty myth now, because I think when I walk around and I look at people, and especially now in this time where we are really trying to sort of celebrate Black identity and the beauty of Black people, or people of color. Does anyone else have a story that they may want to share?
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, for me, yeah, I always struggled with that. Like, am I actually pretty? I mean, you don't really fit into what I'm seeing as being upheld as, like, you know, the pillar of beauty. I don't really have that. For me, my thing was always my hair. It was just like, right? It was always my hair. It's like, everything's good, but, you know, and Ipsita, just like you, and I started crying when you were talking about your nose. It's like, God, because I hate the fact that it is still an issue for me. Like, it's still an issue. And in the back of my head, I still think, you know, if I had the long, I may have even worked more, you know? I feel like it just makes me more palatable, and it's just, and I hate that word, palatable, you know, in our industry. But I have to say, like, so the thing that I have become the most famous for is this character that I played. And I'm so happy that I played her. She was wonderful. But I wore a wig. Like, for 5 seasons, I wore a wig. And it was like this beautiful $10,000 wig. But it did something to me. It's like, I would show up with my hair kind of wild and curly, and then they would pin it all back, and they would put it on, and they would glue it, and it would be like, and then I would feel like, oh, okay, now people see me, and now people are like, oh, wow, yeah, she's really pretty. And then at the end of the day, I'd go into the trailer and they'd take it off and my hair would go again. And then I'd be like, well, I guess now I'm not, I'm not that thing. It's just was so messed up.
Yeah.
And it's because I've carried that with me my whole life. It's like a hair thing, you know, like I'm always kind of apologetic about it. I'm just like, it's just not quite the, you know, the right, and I hate it. And that's my big barrier. It's like, like, yeah, she's pretty, but I don't
But
know.
her hair wasn't, pretty enough. Yeah.
What's that?
I feel like the hair thing is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. It's
Huge. The hair textures, first of all, we have so many different hair textures, and I feel like our hair textures are so different from everybody else's hair. Like everybody else. You don't understand this, right?
Oh.
This is a different ball game, and I think for all of us, or at least for myself, it starts so early. I'm watching it in my own children. I watch it as an educator when I walk down the halls, and the young Black women have hair straightener already. They've got weaves in. And I go, why? And they all comment when I get a haircut. They're like, Miss Cox, your hair. You got a haircut. Is that a barber who did? Like, they have no clue how to deal with their own natural hair.
Yeah.
And so they, and I guess also their parents, reach towards putting in chemicals or covering it in a way that is more palatable and easier to manage. But then what is that doing to the psyche of those kids when they think that their hair is bad and really wild and unmanageable? And I have to constantly check myself with my own hair, but more importantly with the hair of my children.
Yeah.
Making sure I'm like just constantly laying on the praise, laying it on. Oh, it's so beautiful.
Yes.
I love the curls because their friends have already said some sketchy things, and I'm like, my daughter's on
my braids. I'm just sitting here looking at my braids going, yeah, I just pulled, all of the braids out, and then I rebraided it again. And because of what I do, I find it so much easier to have my hair in braids because I'm in fitness. And so but when I did take my hair out and I was looking at it, now mind you, there's a lot of gray streaking through it right now. But when I looked at it, I didn't almost want to put my braids back in. But there's a discomfort, I think, in stepping outside where you have to answer 50,000 questions about your hair. So it becomes something that you just want to cover up because you just don't want to have those questions. And you know what, if I was living in a different environment, if I didn't live in my neighborhood where it was like 95% white, I would probably be able to take my braids out during the pandemic, walk outside. I'd see another sister walking outside with a headscarf or something on her head. We would probably have conversation about her hair, go, yep, we don't have our hairdressers right now, and call it a day. Instead, what I had to do is strategically take out my braids every day and rebraid them so that my hair doesn't get lost in the extension or whatever, so that it doesn't look messy and nasty and gross, but at the same time, I don't have to feel embarrassed going outside with my hair. Nobody else has those issues.
Well, I want to be clear. I am not saying, I think that weaves and extensions and straightener are now embedded in our culture as Black people, as a diversity of Black people. That is just part of the culture. But what I do want is to see more choice. I do want you to feel that I'm going to take these out now and I'm just going to rock my natural hair and no one's going to ask me 50 gazillion questions. And then next week, maybe I'm going to put a wig on. And then I'm going to do this. And because hair is such a strong way of expressing who you are, especially for us.
For Black.
More
Especially in Black culture.
Yeah.
More so than other people.
And in African culture, I mean, when you look at all the different hairstyles and braids, I mean, the oldest extension I saw was at the National History Museum. I was like, what? Like the oldest extension from Africa, a ponytail and whatever. And I feel it's, like, I agree. It's all the questions. And I know I'm definitely a product of growing up watching solid gold dancers, Diana Ross, like all these people. So that's why I love all the, my mom had wigs, hair extensions, pieces. I was very into the sort of glam and theatrical look. I just gravitated to that. And so that's pretty much my look. But I braid my hair. I've always kind of did my own braiding since I was 14. My mom used to take me to get my hair braided because I was in dance. And as Rhonda said, it was just easier to manage with like all the costumes and just put it up in a ponytail if you need, or put it in a bun. And then she said, you better learn and watch because I'm not paying for this anymore. It's cost me too much money. So I self-taught myself and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been something out of laziness too, because it's just easier because I can manage it myself. I just add extensions. But you're right, Rhonda, like when I take it all out and I put my conditioning treatment, my husband, he comes and he likes to get a feel because he just loves my texture. It's like, he's like, oh, this feels so, you know, and then, it just, right. And then I love his comments about, okay, so who's coming in next? Is it Tanisha? Who is it now? Like, it's all laid out and he's all part of the process, right? And but it is kind of that freeing that it would, I mean, be free to, I mean, I'm free in my home, I'm free amongst like my closest people to be without, but in terms of to walk outside, I feel like I've been this personality for so long. I feel this is part of me. I love the glam. I love the glammy glam. So I do love the natural, but it doesn't feel like it's part of my personality either. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's my personality too.
I'm just going to say you have a very cute face. So if you rock natural hair, you'd have cuteness. Whereas I feel for myself personally.
Oh, stop it.
I need some.
No, and that is not true.
Not true at all.
And that's why I feel like white people are allowed to have many choices on what they can do with their hair, and it doesn't really call them less white or less Caucasian or less part of the culture. Yeah. But there is this sort of thing happening now with Black women and the whole natural hair movement, which I am for. But there's also kind of a bit of some of a dissing of like the hair extensions and everything. There has to be either one way or the other way to feel more Black. And I kind of don't. I feel like why can't we also be very diverse? You know what I mean? As every other culture can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we should be able to do it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're still Black.
And, and still feel like you're a Black woman.
Yeah,
I do. I feel that that's something maybe we can talk a little bit about, is that within our own community, just sort of, we were talking about hair and colorism, which I think is super important, but how this really does affect how we view other people who are not sort of staying in the lane. Like if you are Black, this means you need to A, have natural hair, B, have a Black family, C, like there's all of these. Now, I don't believe, though, that those rules are strictly put on us by our own community. I feel that that is also suggested. So my Blackness is actually determined by whiteness. Do you know what I mean? So this is in order for you to be Black, and I really felt this when I traveled as a performer to other countries. I remember being in Croatia and at this place called Split, which is a small little area. It was a blast. But when I was the only Black person for miles, and 4 miles, to the point where I was like, what was the war in Bosnia about? So that I make sure that I am okay. I just want to know when they start shooting, am I in harm's way? Am I a target? Because I can see I'm the only person here that looks like me. And then they said, no, it's about religion. Okay, great. Not that it was great, but I was like, thank you. I just want to know my safety. Right. But I was walking in this village and kids were coming up to me and were saying, what's up? They could not speak English, but what's up was what they said when they saw me, because this is what they're watching on MTV and programming, and they're seeing Black people as one way. And I actually said, hi, how are you? Like I didn't go, yo, what's up, back? Like I didn't do that. That's not how I speak on a regular basis. So I just said, hi, how are you doing today? then I was really rocking my natural hair. So my hair really did look like Jordana's. I have actually, my hair is not super tight curly. It's like, I do have a little bounce. So, and I had a big bounce at that time, and I was really rocking my fro. And I think that really just kind of made people go, ooh,
Oh yeah.
if you know what I mean?
Talks like this, but she looks like that. How is this
like
happening?
that? How is that, right? But I do think that with this new movement, that there is a shaming of women that choose to wear their hair with extensions. There is a shaming of women who suddenly decide that their life partner happens to be a person that is not in the Black race. Does anybody want to, Jordana, do you want to comment a little bit on that? Like this feeling of like, does it take away your Blackness because there's whiteness in your life?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that happens on a daily basis for everybody. Like you're just getting looked at, or, you know, going back to the hair thing for me, like I used to like straighten my hair and people would be like, oh my God, you look so beautiful with your hair straight, you know? And I'm like, wait, so the other 360 days that I had my hair curly, you didn't think I looked pretty?
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those things. And especially like you guys know, being in like dance too, like I'm the only person like this in my company, like, or in my community. Like I don't see anybody around me in Leslieville that, you know, looks like that, has this. So it's just that constant thinking of what beauty is and what white beauty is necessarily, like, and how that gets put on us on a daily basis and everything.
Yes. Yeah. Lisa, you were going to say something as well?
I have no idea what I was going to say, but I will say, I remember. But what I will say is it is a conscious decision on my part as an educator, as someone who walks through a building with 600 students, to have natural hair. I just feel like it's important for those girls to know what their hair looks like and that their hair is beautiful, and that an educated, powerful woman can walk through the space confidently and comfortably rocking their natural hair. I make a point of talking to my girls about their hair, whether like extensions, all of it, all of them. Oh, you did your hair today. Oh, did your mama do your braids? Like we fully go there. And I think that is important, that they know that there's someone in the building who can engage in that dialogue and normalize it for the white kids.
Yeah.
Who are witnessing that exchange. And witnessing me walking through the space with natural hair. I just, it's important. And I think a lot of the backlash around hair, for those of us with natural hair, if we're backlashing, it's because we want to be normalized as well. Right. I just feel like right now it's still considered a radical choice for me to have natural hair. People make assumptions about me when I come in through the space because I have natural hair. And some days when I was rocking my braids, I would like have my braids in one day, and the next day I would take my braids out, and there's a stark difference in how people treated me in the world.
Oh yeah.
Night and day. People were way nicer to me when I had braids and weaves in. Way nicer to me. And I was told consistently that I was way more beautiful. It's like, I'm actually the exact same person. People actually, like, to the extent that some people would tell me I'm more, they would react to me as if I was more intelligent. And I was like, it's the exact same person.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
It's interesting, even with braids, I was going to say that when you have braids, instead of having straight hair, there's even a difference in how people perceive you. Braids, for the longest time, for whatever reason, people thought was very unsophisticated, and that it kind of puts you in a class level of like a working class level. And so one of the reasons why I decided not to put in extensions that were straight and wear braids was just because I thought braids create a very regal look on a woman, depending on how you're wearing them. And I also felt, well, it was practical, for one, because of the industry that we were in. I wanted something to cover up the damage that had been done. And also I was tired, like my hair is natural under the braids. I don't relax it anymore, but I did relax my mom. I sat at an oven and my mom would hot comb. Do you guys remember?
I had that with the hot
Creamy crack.
Oh my.
Years of creamy crack.
Yes, just the hot comb, and you could smell the burning hair when you walked in the house because that's just, yes, and you had the burn on the ear. Yes, the burn on the ear, because that's just what they were taught, that you did the lie or you had the hot comb. Those are the options. That's what kept the kids safe in school, that it didn't expose them to getting the terrible harassment, or you come home with hands, like imprints of hands in your hair if you didn't have that. So I can see how, like from a very young age, young Black girls are forced into a belief that their hair is not acceptable.
Oh, for sure. I think like for me growing up, at first I didn't see anything different with my hair just because of like the community I was in the Bronx. And then when we moved to Pennsylvania, only kid in like my grade with curly hair.
Yeah.
And like called Brillo pad, being people put things in my hair because, you know, when it's big, you can't necessarily feel a piece of paper back there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that making me want to then straighten my hair and go to my mom and be like, I want straight hair.
Yeah.
But before that, I never saw anything wrong with it. And then that lasted pretty much into my mid-20s until I decided to not chemically straighten my hair anymore, to let it grow out, cut it all off so that, you know, it can just be its natural self, but it stays with you. And even in like dance art forms, you know, like I will never go on stage with hair out like this. Like, it's just not a thing, you know. You like ballet, you know, you just think of the girls with the Balanchine with the straight blonde hair, like that's considered like beautiful for having your hair out to do dance. But like, I don't think I would ever go out on stage with my hair like this.
Which is so scary.
That's amazing. With that, like if I saw that,
exactly.
Oh my god,
that would totally like draw my eye. I would think that is beautiful.
And that's why.
That is why.
It's
I'm telling you,
that is
it. Everything that we have been told is ugly, I feel it's because it is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something that you said, Rhonda, you know, when you were talking about like, you know, why Black people were brought to the United States and Canada, and everything that we do, and you know, everything that, you know, we were brought here to do and have done. And those were all thought to be our weaknesses, or what makes us, you know, and then people sort of like piled on and said, you know, said all these horrible things about us. And it's kind of like all of those things, when you really look at it, I was like, those are not weaknesses. I'm like, it kind of makes us look like superheroes. Like, it's all of those things make us so much stronger, you know, when we're thought to be like the inferior race, when we are thought to be, you know, like we're down here and whiteness is up here. I'm just sort of like, really? That's
no. I think growing, like just being older now, you realize how much all those things are just myths.
Oh, yeah, well, obviously, yes.
Right? Like I mean, I had to, even just with the melanin in our skin, how it's more protected from the sun, and you know, just how it can take up more sun, and now people have to really worry about the sun. And we're like, oh, I'm okay. I don't have to really worry that much, you know. And then, you know, and then when even
like so conditioned, right? Like it's
so
like
conditioned, and the butt thing, like now, like growing up, you know, especially in the 90s, was skinny. The image was skinny, white, big boobs, like that came out. And then the behind, so I always thought I was fat. Like when I met my husband, I thought I was fat. I had a round booty. And then now this explosion of all ethnicities getting booties. I know. It's like
Kardashian syndrome.
Oh my goodness.
I posted
the lips and the thing
called blackfishing. I don't know if you guys
I did see that. It scared me.
Did it not scare you, all those pictures of like, and I was just like, this is, because some of the pictures I was like, if you really want, if this is, it had, so it was this thing I posted, and it's called Blackfishing, and it had these before and after pictures of these women that are white, but that are, and the after pictures are them. Honestly, it's basically just blackface.
It's blackface.
Because they are like, they're completely like bronzed, and then their lips are done in such a way, their hair is like, I'm like, if this is what you really want, you may as well just hire black model. This is, yeah. And they're talking this explosion where these white people are taking over spaces that really belong to black people, you know, and platforms that really belong to black people, but they're white, you know, so they call it blackfishing. And it's hi
Ridley.
Someone cut her hair.
Love it, Ridley.
That is so fresh. I love it. I'm gonna do my hair like
little Ridley. Yeah, no, when I first saw that, I actually burst out into laughter because I thought it was more of an uncomfortable laughter, because I thought for many, many years I would never see myself in a magazine. But the fact that people are calling this, you know, some of these pictures art, it just kind of makes me go, like, if you really wanted to have a bronzed woman, why would you just not hire a black model?
Yeah.
And my other thought was that the bronze is now being okay, but it's the features that are not, is what I'm seeing. So this nose, this mouth is not.
That one model, it was like Afro puffs, and I was just like, no.
I know. Lisa's eyes just went like, what the what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
You know, and she was so dark. I was like, that is not, I mean, this girl was like as white can be. She was so dark. I'm like, that is blackface. That is
blackface, fancy blackface. That's what I call it.
Fancy.
All, you know, high tech, smooth, you know, high def.
Yes. And then the lips done in like a light pink. I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
It is not. I like that there's a name for it now, because now when I see people do it, I can just be like, blackfishing. Hashtag blackfishing.
Hashtag blackfishing. Yeah. No. I think that we kind of moved a little bit away from our interracial relationships, but I just I feel like some of this is super important to talk about, and so I'm like, let's just let the conversation go where it's going to go, because I feel that there's so much within our own community that, and colorism, I feel, plays such a big role in how we view ourselves. But I do think that when I was in a spot where it's like, yeah, this is me and my blackness, and I'm comfortable, then a beautiful man was attracted to me. Didn't happen to be like a, you know, black, white, whatever, but the right kind of man was attracted to me, because he could see that I had this confidence and this, I was settled in my own skin. He didn't need to know, like, well, before you, I had a lot of issues going on with how I looked and stuff. But when I met Charles, I had an afro. I met him on the train. I had a full-on afro. And there's Kaden. Hi, Kaden. What would you say would be the most positive experience that you've had as an interracial couple? And do you think that in the future we will see more couples that are interracial? Oh, we'll let Lisa start. Yeah, Lisa, say real quick. What's one positive thing?
I think that I've really learned to negotiate interracial dynamics and conversation quite tactfully, because you have to, and you have to on a daily basis with someone you love very, very deeply, and you start to view the world differently when you have interracial children as well. And when you engage in those conversations around race with your kids, you're realizing you're talking to someone who is both Black and white. So you have to take care of both sides of that person when you engage in those conversations. Yeah. So being a lot more empathetic. So that would be the most positive thing for me.
Awesome. Rachel, what do you think has been the most positive thing that you can bring to having this kind of relationship? What would your positive?
Oh gosh, I feel like Lisa said it so eloquently. Just the marrying of so many diverse backgrounds and bringing it forth into another generation of kids. And I feel like it's becoming, I think that it's becoming more and more prevalent that we are bringing forth children who are everything, that we are a global community and that we are citizens of the world, and that and so the dialogues around what makes us different are becoming, I don't know, hopefully less frequent. Like just being able to celebrate everything that my children have within them, and making that exciting and wonderful, and something that they can really, I don't know, feel a sense of pride in. I love that. I love being able, I'm constantly talking to my kids about their ancestry and how it, gosh, I mean, it comes from Tanzania, but it also comes from Ireland, and it's also like Nordic, and you've got all of this stuff that you can draw upon, and it's beautiful. And I love that. I love being able to instill that in my babies.
Yes, definitely. And Charmaine, I was going to ask you as well, like, what do you feel, because your relationship seems to be super positive as far as your ability to express your Blackness loud and proud and strong, and yet you're still in this beautiful relationship with your husband who supports your voice. What would you say would be the most positive thing?
I feel like us coming together was really like living the change. Like we represent the change and progress, and that you can come from, two different backgrounds and yet have so much in common and click like this from the day you met. And I feel just us being us together. And I think it's a positive image that I think other little Black girls can see. Yeah, I mean, you can have a different type of relationship than what maybe your mother and father had. It can look very different, and it's okay. And I feel the positivity is also having the discussions. Like I'm very comfortable having discussions with people of other cultures. That sort of discomfort that some people don't want to have, I have with my husband all the time. So I'm actually very comfortable in having the discussions about issues even now, especially now with the whole, racialized tension going on. I feel very equipped, and I have somebody in my corner that just gets it. So the positivity is that I can share that and have other white people understand where I'm coming from, that I'm not attacking, obviously, because I sleep in my bed, I have a white man, but right. You know what I mean? So I'm not coming from that place, so they can understand where I'm coming from when I want to talk about race and white privilege and stuff like that. It's like they're less defensive because they understand the relationship I'm in. So I think that's a positive too. Mm-hmm. And that I am coming from a loving place. I just want to love everybody as much as I can. And I want us all just to recognize the problems and come together. So I feel that that's been the positive, and that just representing love.
Yeah, because I think this is a human issue when two people who love each other, if you really think about it, 53 years ago, two people who love each other really didn't have an opportunity to be together in the same way that other people are able to be together. And I find that looking at that now, it feels a bit ridiculous that would be a problem. But for my lovely three mixed individuals, and I don't know if I said that correctly or not, but I feel that what the positivity that's happening, I think maybe now in as far as these relationships is that your life actually means more than being this thing that happened out of the relationship that shouldn't have happened, that your identities are confirmed, that your love, it wasn't like a lustful moment between the races, that it was that you're products of love and products of lasting relationships. Sita, how does for you, especially, I think since you shared so much about, you know, having to re-find your identity, how do you feel that today, living in the relationship that you are now, that are you able to really dig deep and find both sides, be proud of both, finally be proud of especially one side of your background?
Yes. I mean, I think that this is still like a huge process, but I feel like in my relationship with my husband, I feel like the I feel like we are still digging really deep, and the biggest part for us right now is just empathy. Like empathy towards each other, and there is so much growth happening and still happening, and we are really trying to pass that on to our kids and just show that we have strength throughout all of this. I believe that the world is just going to be brown, so everyone just needs to get, everyone just needs to get on board with this. But I feel like they're picking up so much, and I'm proud of that. But really it's about growth and empathy right now.
And Jordana, I was going to ask you that as well, as you travel in a world where you said you've been able to kind of experience the world from both sides of the fence, and living in environments where, people are unknowingly know that you are mixed, and that the other part of that mixture is Black, and how that is made. How has that been for you in your own personal life? And then later on in your life, when you decide to, have children with your husband, how are you going to make sure that your child has that feeling of security in their identity?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think how my parents raised me and just how aware I was from a very young age of all of this that goes on in the world shaped me into the person that I am today. And then that is definitely something that I would want to pass on to my children in the future. And my husband is just completely, like, it wasn't a new conversation with everything that's going on. Like, my husband has been like this his whole life as well. Charmaine, I think, like, what you were saying.
Yeah.
So, like, my husband has done more research on Haiti, because that's like what part of my background is, than like I have. Because he's like, we need to know these things, we need to pass on that culture, that history, like everyone needs, like our kids in the future need to know this. Like, he's very supportive and loving, and I don't think I could be with anybody else besides him, because he's just so into it and wants that to still be passed on to our future kids. So it's like so important to me, and it's so important to him. And I think that's what makes that, unity and making a brown world.
Yeah. And do you guys think a relationship like this can work if there isn't that empathy, if there isn't an awareness of background, if everyone is just trying to live a life that is entrenched in whiteness, if you don't let the other half in, do you think a relationship like this can work? Rachel. Sorry, Ipsita, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, empathy, I think, is the biggest piece of the puzzle. Because so I don't think that white people can ever really truly understand what we go through, but I think that empathy is the biggest piece. Because I've gone through, I've had some very difficult conversations. That's sort of been, this whole thing has really sort of pushed me forward and propelled me forward to sort of have conversations with members of my husband's side of the family. And the one thing that I've kind of realized is that some people have a lot of empathy, and some people just don't have that empathy chip, that they cannot. And that's been really hard to kind of come to grips with, that if you don't have empathy, then it doesn't come together.
Absolutely.
I would say that I also had some conversations as well, in that same light. Just like, how can you, I've kind of phrased it like, how can you truly love me, but not love the community that I'm a part of? And I've been reading lately that there's sort of like these characteristics that we put on a group of people based on a few. And so the few people that you see on the news getting arrested then colorizes the whole entire group. And we don't do that with white culture. We don't look at, you know, we don't, when somebody goes and shoots up a whole bunch of people, we don't go, wow, man, all white people, they're killers, right? We don't do that. When you're in a situation where you see a white person, like something like Jeffrey Epstein, and has a sex trafficking ring, we don't walk around thinking that all white men are going to be taking our young girls and making them sex traffickers. But yet, for whatever reason, we can't do the same for other ethnic groups. And I feel that this is very scary, but I think also very revealing. So when people say, oh, you know, there's a Black person on the news, they're always shooting and killing each other, I'm like, you know what I did today? I made some dinner for my husband and my daughter. I walked the dog. At no point did I have a weapon. At no point did I, you know, was I cussing and swearing at somebody, or at no point did I have any kind of interaction with the law. And I would say that 95% of the time that would be most people that I know. So I feel like when we can have a chance to get rid of some of that, I think that we'll have less of this when people see couples that look like us walking down the street. Do you agree that hierarchy won't matter? And that we'll start to, like we talked about the other day, getting rid of that hierarchy, getting rid of that ladder, and just looking at each other as people.
I feel like it just has to come with just having more like images of Black people just different, like out there, like the scholar, the nurse, the doctor, the this. And I think that will squash that. I feel like representation, like what is being fed, like, I love the hip hop culture, but you know, it's been purposely pushed in a particular direction. And then that's what people label, you know, most men, oh, they're thugs, they're criminals, they're everything. Where there is another side of hip hop, which is the conscious rap that was really big when I started getting into hip hop, that was actually squashed. So you see the narrative that they want to keep playing. And even the stereotypes of Black women, always strong, they're a cop or they're this, but not like the one that will faint and swoon. Like, we don't see that. So I feel like when there's that visual happening, even that, I don't want to rely on, you know, media to be the teacher, but I mean, it does. Like, you see a lot of it. Yeah, like, you see a lot of it. It just is everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's important because it's like through in media, it's like how many times, I mean, like I can think of like Blackish is like one of the one places where you actually see like a Black family. It's like, where do we see like healthy Black families? You know, like out there in the world. It's kind of like I feel like we need to see a lot more of that because and make it really make it more prominent. But even just like in movies or anywhere else, it's like, or in theater, it's like, why does it have to just be, instead of just having, like we've talked about this before, even just the last time, in just hiring, it could be about anything. Why are we so hesitant to hire just the best people for the job and just having just people of color on stage or people of color in a movie? And it's not about anything in particular. It doesn't have to be a Black story.
It's not about slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Not about slavery, not about our hardships. Just normalize it so that we are just out there.
But I want to go one better. Why can't we see Rachel's family or my family or your family on the news without having it to be some kind of like crazy story that brought us together? No, what brought us together was a train ride, right? What brought your mom and dad together, Rachel, was an absolute miracle. But right? But that's an interesting story that has nothing to do, like all the other things that are happening in and around her family or because of societal rules and systemic racism and those types of things. But the people themselves, they're just regular people. President of the United States and a woman that happened to meet as an intern. It's like, you know what I mean? It's just regular people doing regular things. My problem, I think, when you have a show, and I feel almost like Shonda Rhimes in some ways gets it, you know, because of the way that she casts. It's about an energy with the people. It's not about I definitely want to have a Black woman here and I definitely want to have a white guy here because I want to make a point. It's like, let's just talk about the love between two people, right? The love that these two people have, and that's it. And I think that honestly, that's what the Lovings unintentionally did. All they wanted to do was live in their little town in Virginia, raise their kids in the house that he wanted to build for his family. That was what he wanted. And the fact that they were taken out of their house in the middle of the night because of love, they weren't bothering anybody. They weren't in, you know, the FBI wasn't looking for them. They were just regular people with a marriage certificate, chilling at home in their beds, and they were carted off to jail. And I think that's what struck me so much when I actually did watch the movie. I was just really taken back by the fact that my husband and I, if things were different, could be lying in bed and somebody could come into my house, there's no reason, and just separate us just because of that. Just because of love.
Same.
So, so I think it's quite significant that happened in our lives, and that I'm hoping that we will continue to move and grow. Rachel, I was just going to say, because I feel that your experience in your family, it's so rich. Is there anything that you can add that we can sort of end with here that can describe how your view of the world is different because of how you grew up?
Well,
I
but
know.
I will say this. Like I keep saying that from my mom's side, she never understood the insecurities that her daughters had because she didn't grow up with this notion that a Eurocentric appearance was better. Like for her, it was just like, and she railed against us wanting to straighten our hair. It was like, why? She didn't understand it. But because those other images, and it goes back to what we were just talking about, how we have to change the stories that we are hearing because that seeps into us and it informs everything. But, you know, how did that inform me? I grew up with my, you know, mainly white relatives. Those were the relatives that I saw most frequently. And I feel like I understood that our being who we were was changing and affecting Ipsita, like what you were saying, those who had empathy, those who had the ability to allow themselves to see things differently were forever changed by us. And I think they were changed for the better, you know, like they were changed for the better. My grandmother was changed for the better, you know, because she was empathetic and she allowed herself to start to shift and to understand things differently. And that opened up her world, and, you know, and she started traveling, and it just changed everything. So, gosh, I mean, it's hard for me to parse out exactly how my life, it's hard to articulate. I always knew that I was both sides. I never called myself, obviously I could never call myself white, but I never necessarily even called myself Black. I always knew that I was both, and that was a good thing. I also knew that was very hard for people to understand, and that people wouldn't understand it, and that immediately upon seeing me, they would just label me one thing.
Yes.
Right. But I just always knew that was part of who I was, and I loved that. It's interesting because I feel like as a kid, I made sense when both my parents were walking with me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I always felt like, you know, there was always like a, And then when my mom and dad were together and we were walking, you know, then we made sense. We were like, I get it.
Yes.
And it was a statement. And it was just, I don't know, there was something very empowering about it. Like, we were a very tight family because of, getting emotional. Because of that, because you know, because of my parents' love for each other, which was very real. I just feel like everywhere we went, it was like it was a statement.
It was a statement. That's how I feel, honestly. So I think it's just really important that people understand the types of things that families like ours endure, but also that we're willing to endure it because love is more powerful than the hate that is thrown at us in every direction, you know. And in that, I will end this conversation. I appreciate you all so much, and thank you so much for sharing your stories, talking about colorism and how that's made a huge impact on how Black women view themselves, how Black women are viewed in society, and also for sharing your hearts about the loves of your lives and the love of your families. And I can't wait to have another conversation with you all again.
Yes.
So have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Thank you.